Well, thank you very much for coming here during your lunch hour. I appreciate it, to talk about eating brains. I've been working in this industry in the advertising industry and creative industry for about 20 years, and about 10 of that I've spent as a creative director in pseudo-upper management positions. So I've kind of played the whole gamut, run the whole gamut, and also worked at a lot of different sized companies. I worked at one of the largest advertising agencies in the world called Publicis. I've worked at small agencies. I've worked at tiny little shops doing consulting and freelance. Some of it to do with big brands, and some of it to do with just people wanting to make cool-looking business cards. So I've kind of played in that whole space, and throughout that time, I used to keep notes. I kept a little moleskin in my pocket and a pen, and when I came across things that I thought weren't working very well, or that I didn't appreciate about the system, calling it the system, I'd jot it down, and I had this little fantasy that I was going to start my own covert agency called Agency Zero, where nobody knew who actually worked there, and I was going to ask some of the best talent in the world to come and secretly work for me, even though they worked at other jobs, and we would secretly do work for, I don't know, secret clients that didn't exist, that couldn't actually pay me money. But that was my crazy fantasy. In the last couple of months, I'd say, and it's probably been a few years now, but in the last couple of months, I've noticed that it feels like there's a bit of a sea change happening, and I'm noticing more and more things pop up in my feeds, in Flipboard and such, that talk about the future of work. And I was looking at and reading these and going, these seem to line up a bit with some of the notes that I've been taking for a long time, and I decided that I was going to go back and I was going to look at them again, and I was going to organize them, and I was going to see if they lined up with anything. And it turns out that it does, and I really want to share that with you today. That's the whole purpose of this. So my name is Jason Theodor, but I go by JTED, at JTED on Twitter. If you go to flipboard.com, at JTED. If you go to medium.com, at JTED, you'll find my writing and a bunch of material. But I'm going to take you through it now. So one of the things that really, really inspired me, and I'm going to keep pacing because that's kind of how I do this, but one of the things that really inspired me was this idea from a man named Danny DeGrave. He said, he wrote a big article about work, but he said, go to Google and just type in "work makes me" and see what happens. The autocomplete is crazy. This was yesterday, all right? Work makes me inspired. Work makes me feel amazing. Work makes me, or, none of that's there. It's buried pretty far down. Work makes me suicidal is number 3. Work makes me depressed. Work makes me cry. It's terrible. It's the work-pocalypse. I had to practice saying that a lot. Work-pocalypse, work-pocalypse, work-pocalypse. I made up this word, and then I have to stumble on it. So this idea of work sucks is not new. And actually, one of my favorite authors, Douglas Copeland, wrote this seminal masterpiece called Generation X, which is about my generation. And he came up with this term called the McJob. And the idea, well, he popularized it. He didn't necessarily come up with it. But a low pay, low prestige, low dignity, low benefit, no future job in the service sector. And I think that we're actually coming to a new age now where I call it the I job. And the I job is a no pay, no prestige, no dignity, no benefit, no anti-job. that's actually run by data analysts, analysis and software algorithms, and not by humans at all. So you've got your middle management completely erased by companies like Uber, and there's a whole bunch of them that are just using algorithms, and in a way, what's left? If you don't have a career, if you don't have something sort of a solid stream to get into, you're kind of left with McGigs, right? It's just one little gig after another little gig, and there's a bunch of websites that take advantage of that, like TaskRabbit or Fiverr, but you can't really make a living doing these tiny little tasks day after day. You're just not going to get by. So the pessimistic side of me says we're in the workpocalypse. Right now, there's this base of, or this idea that we'll start at the bottom of the workpocalypse here, where it's about money. Okay, so many organizations, they say they want creativity, they say that they want things to be exciting, but really, money is the bottom line. If you want to be inspired, it's like, well, let's strive to have the best ROI, the best return on investment. Is that really going to inspire me? In a way, it's a carrot, right? So we're going to give you money, we're going to spend money, our goal is to make money, so we're going to use money to get the best talent, and we're going to pay them well, maybe. But money isn't exactly what people want. People need it. It's important, but it's not the most important thing, because if a company just strives for money and they don't have a purpose, then another company comes along and offers someone more money and they leave. Or they're afraid all the time of, you signed a contract, so now you owe them. They're paying you. You're chained to your desk. It becomes an obligation. I think when the goal is money, it doesn't matter how you do it or what the consequences are, as long as more than enough money is flowing in. And I think we need to move past that. So when it's just about making a profit, then you have to set up rules. You have to enforce these certain rules so that people don't take advantage. Like, I think of how I like to work, and for me to come up with great ideas, for me to be inspired and look at a bunch of things, I like to analyze things. I need to think, and sitting at a desk between the hours of 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or whatever it is, between Monday and Friday, I'm not necessarily going to have the best ideas. Sometimes I like to have a nap. I call it sleepworking. I like to go for a run, and I can think while I'm running. And then if I have a steam afterwards, a lot of ideas come from just that exertion. But that doesn't exist in a lot of environments. There are rules. There are specific rules. We are paying you. We own you. Now we expect you to do what we want you to do, what you're supposed to do. And these rules are imposed without consultation, because we're paying for you, you're not as important. As a consequence, what people do with these rules then is they try to game the system, because there's no respect for the company, there's no purpose for them to pay into or buy into. Instead, they're bought. So they game the system, which means you look at your contract and you go, okay, how many sick days do I have? And how many bereavement, if I add those to bereavement days and sick days and maybe a personal day, I can squeeze another week of pseudo vacation where I'm, a little bit stressed out. But people try to game the system. They try to figure out, if I take my break a little bit longer, maybe I'll miss the boss coming by, and people purposefully start taking advantage. And this way of thinking then actually creates this reactionism, this crisis where, shoot, someone isn't here to do their job today, so now what are we going to do? We're going to scramble, and there's crisis after crisis for management. And the company can never focus, and they can never plan for their future because they're constantly trying to catch up with the people that are breaking the rules. And then figuring out, well, we're paying them too much, so if we axe these people, then maybe we can hire 2 cheaper people to take their place, and it all starts to go a little bit more crazy. But it's reacting to the situations that you've created is about treating the symptoms. So, at a lot of companies, they just keep treating the symptoms, symptom after symptom. If we throw more money at it or take money away from it, maybe it'll go away, instead of actually looking at the root cause, which is that your company doesn't actually know why it exists. And this creates fear for your job. Are you going to have this job? Are you going to be able to keep this job? Is someone watching me and making sure that I come in at 9 and then watching me to make sure that I don't leave at 5, actually? There's a great quote from Richard Sheridan, who's written a book called Joy, Inc., and he says, fear doesn't make bad news go away. Fear makes bad news go into hiding. If mistakes are hidden, they grow until they metastasize and they kill the organization. So being afraid means that you're not actually sharing, and that means that innovation and transformation can't happen. So, put the thumb down. Management or whomever is above you in the organization has to police things because, and they have to do this through fear and intimidation in many ways. Control what devices you get to use. Control when you get to eat and when you get to sleep. Control who you have access to, who you get to talk to. Give you limited access to decision makers so that they can be the gatekeepers. And control basically your future. And then, of course, the employees double down on hiding and creating more secrets and less sharing. And this whole rigmarole starts to breed paranoia within the organization. You're not just afraid, but you think someone's actually out to get you, to take over your job or take your job. Who's got your back? Nobody has your back. Who's spreading rumors about you? Everyone's spreading rumors about you. Where you have to close your window because you're watching a cat video on Facebook, and you're supposed to do something, and now that's going to cause a whole mess of trouble. You came in 10 minutes late, but it was because you were talking to the boss, but now you're worried that other people around you or perhaps your manager are going to think that you're tardy. So it breeds this paranoia, and then everyone starts playing politics, and everyone's out to get you. And how fun is that? So if you can survive all of this stuff, and you can figure out how it works, you can game the system, you can make money, you can work your way up to the top, you can cause fear, you can learn how to control people more, you can take advantage of the paranoia, and you can work your way up to one of the cliques, which is, the next group up, to the exclusion of others, set up, basically work your way up this ladder. And you have to be the one that reinforce the rules then, and you have to be the one that is reacting and trying to plug all the holes that are happening in your leaky boat. And you have to do that by having a big stick and making people afraid of how you're going to react. But eventually, if you sacrifice basically everything in your life, you might reach the final clique, which is the inner circle of the executive management in your company. And once you get there, then what you have to do is preserve your spot. You have to protect it. And, wow, this is so depressing, isn't it? Yeah, I'll get to the good part later. The inspirational part's coming. But it's not lonely at the top. It's very, very crowded. You have to protect your space. And this comes from a really long time ago. I mean, we talk about the industrial age, but this comes from the feudal times. I mean, this is a king protecting his kingdom. This is and surrounding himself with a castle and a moat and a bunch of knights that he sends out to make sure that nobody has access to him or her as a queen, and that they get to keep all their gold and they get to keep, the system moving. And we've built a lot of our companies like this. We've built a lot of them very, very top-heavy in terms of who gets the say and who gets control. And it can be really, really tough to kind of move your way through this system for everybody. It sucks just as much for the people at the top, although they have more money, albeit. But they basically become the emperor of the working dead, because all the people that are below them are uninspired. They're not helping to build better culture. They're not helping to transform the company. How's the company going to be ready for the future, which is continuously accelerating? It's tough. So I think that this kingdom and this idea is slowly coming to an end, which is exciting and terrifying at the same time. Right? We have to flip this thing. This whole idea of top-heavy has to change, and we have to think about it differently. So instead of thinking about this as the workpocalypse, if we just turn it around and look at it from a slightly different angle, actually upside down, maybe we can get to this thing called jobvana. And the idea here is, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Obviously, we've taken hundreds of years, thousands of years to build the system that we have now. It's just that we're at this confluence right now of a bunch of different things. One is this acceleration of technology. We have this exponential acceleration that's changing our lives incredibly fast. How many of you can even remember when there weren't touch screens, never mind rotary phones and no internet? Touch screens on phones and devices have only existed for about 8 years. But already we're talking about drones and watches that are recording our heartbeats and will eventually be in our bodies. It's crazy. So not the watches in our bodies. That's Pulp Fiction. So we're in this sort of awkward tween phase here. We're in between the idea of workpocalypse and jobvana. But jobvana is an inspiring place to attempt to get to. And I'm going to explain to you why. So we have to start with purpose. Instead of it being about preservation, and instead of building our companies on the idea that it's just about making money, are we making enough money, are we making more money than we did before? We can still make money. We need money. Money's great. But why not build it on something different? Why not build it on a purpose? So instead of trying to protect everything that we already have, why don't we try to create something that people can participate in? If you're in survivalist mode, you're just looking out for number one. You have no loyalty. You have no respect. You have no community. You have no nothing. You have a wasteland. That's workpocalypse. But, it's really, really easy in the workpocalypse to get cynical. And the whole point of a purpose is to try to get rid of that cynicism. Because the cynicism is what bites you. That's what kills you. That's what turns you into the working dead. If you're cynical about work, you're cynical about your job, you're cynical about your company, it's over. You're just waking up, going to work, and going home. And you're going to take advantage as much as you possibly can. So the idea of purpose is dream big, don't get bit by cynicism. So companies have created these mission statements. And see, who knows whose mission statement this is? Organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Google. So they have a mission. And although their mission is changing, and Larry Page recently said that he thinks that they need to change their mission statement because they're making autonomous cars now and a bunch of other crazy things. So he thinks they might need to change their focus, but the point is they have a focus. How about this one? To give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected. Who's Facebook? Yeah. They're going to get a little bit harder, maybe. To bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Who's Nike? An athlete means everybody. If you have a body, you're an athlete, according to Nike. What about this one? A collaborative project to produce. Yeah. I had you at collaborative. What about this one? To make the world laugh a little every day. They're all good. They're all really close. But it's actually cheeseburger. Icon has cheeseburger. What I absolutely love about Icon has cheeseburger, I went and saw Ben Huh, who's their CEO. I went and saw him at an event that FITC put on, actually, or the people from FITC. And he spoke about purpose and having a mission statement, and I thought that what he said was really, really important. And it was... Now I'm going to forget. No, it was that if you take your mission statement and you turn it and you put it up on the wall as a poster, it can really quickly turn into dogma. And dogma becomes something that's imposed on you versus something that you feel inside you. So when you start at a new company and they're like, oh, we've got a mission, and they've got a big poster on the wall that sits right behind you and by your desk, looming over you, that says, we're the greatest. And you look at that thing every single day, and every time that you don't feel the greatest, you go, ugh, this is the worst. It's the worst place. So it can actually work backwards. It can actually create cynicism because you can see the hypocrisy around you. So it's better to have, what he said was at Icon Has Cheeseburger, at cheeseburger.com, he said, their mission statement is something that people should intrinsically feel. So to make the world laugh a little bit every day is something that he will say, and that people at work will say, and it's something that they will feel when they come into work, and that they will just know because they're in the organization. It's not something that has to be taught necessarily or told, but it's something that when you join, you buy into. Not like a cult, but like an idea that gives it some meaning. So enough about purpose. I don't have a heck of a lot more time. But partnership, right? I know, Daryl and Carol. So I'm not going to talk too much about The Walking Dead because I don't want to ruin anything. There are some pictures from season 5 in here, so if you haven't seen it, hopefully they won't be overly spoilery. But if you need to, you could leave now or cover your eyes. But partnership is so much different than a clique, because a partnership is built on mutual respect instead of earned superiority, right? So in many companies, you earn your way to be the leader. Whereas with partnership, you're collaborating. It's something that you've decided on together. So what do you call it when you're forced to do demeaning things and suffer grave abuses with no monetary compensation? Parenthood, that's one. It's really, it's called slavery, right? And that's how a lot of people feel about their job, that they're slaves. If you get paid for doing something, or if you do what you're told just because someone's paying you, what's that called? It's prostitution. And it doesn't really help your self-esteem. Whereas a partnership, even if it's an arranged marriage, a partnership is an agreement between consenting parties that they're going to work together for the betterment of each other. So you can't read that. It says 7 more people quit this week. You're not planning on leaving anytime soon, are you? And he says, no, not at all. And he says, great, because you're going to have to work this weekend to cover for all those people. Yay, partnership. What's interesting is that, when I said that there's this confluence of technology as number one, number two is the millennials and the changing generation. So we're getting to a workforce right now that could possibly have 5 generations working in one company at the same time. You could have the silent generation. Anyone here from the silent generation? Very good, very good. That's why they're called the silent generation. The boomers. Any of you here boomers? Gen Xers? Anyone here from Gen X? Or, I know you all hate labels. Millennials? See, okay, some of you don't mind the label millennial. Most people I know hate the label millennials. They prefer Generation Y, right? No. And then you could have, I don't even know what the heck they're called right now, Generation Z for lack of imagination. But, they're just starting to get into, anyone here from Generation Z? I thought there was a hand going up, but you're just rubbing your hand through your hair. So the millennials, actually, it's very interesting. I got this from Virgin, not a Virgin. Oh my God, I got this from Richard Branson. That sounds better. A big magazine that he put out, or a big paper he put out about work, and I totally love this because he talks about collaborative leaders, and you can't read this at all. At all. Wow. But millennials want their leaders to be more collaborative. And instead of having a system where, the person in power, the first one is about power, and power means that you're put in a position of authority. What they actually want is to work in a collaborative team. They want it to be a learning institution, is what their people are calling it now, where you come in and you get to be more fluid in terms of what you're working on and how you're learning and what you're getting out of your job versus here's your role and now you have to stick to it. So anyway, partnership means that you, your boss, if there is a boss, and your team are all working together. And to do that, you need to have trust. So in the other model, you have rampant paranoia where everybody's watching their back. With trust, you have to, if you want it to work, if you want the partnership to work, you have to trust each other. You have to trust that the people are doing their best. And what I liken it to is a family where you let people do your job. So in your family, or hopefully in your family, you feel like, everyone has a common goal and that everyone is participating in some way. Certain things need to get done. Sometimes you have to dictate them. Sometimes I have to tell my daughter to clean her room. Sometimes I have to tell my son to do the kitty litter. But for the most part, everyone at least agrees that there's a common purpose that we're all trying to achieve. And instead of setting up really, really strict rules, and I know that if I'm respected, that someone is going to actually do what they're expected to do. That ownership creates a certain amount of accountability to yourself and to your team because you're doing it together and you're in it together. So here's another thing that you probably can't read at all, but people don't screw over people that they respect. So you don't have to worry about that paranoia as much. Now here, this is a virtuous cycle where you give your employees responsibilities and then they take ownership. And then the idea of the leaders and the employees starts to become a bit blurred. There's a lot of shared activities, shared qualities, and shared learning. And the well-being of your employees leads to more engagement, and that leads to better well-being, which leads to more engagement, and you start to actually create an engine that allows you to be excited about being at work and make things happen. Then you can start to look at transformation. Then you can start to look at the changes that are coming, and you're not so totally afraid, which I guess takes us to the next. Not quite. So transparency. Transparency versus the control that we had before, where you need to have control. Here we're talking about sharing and real-time feedback, which is another thing that's really important, especially for millennials, because you're used to it. You're used to more instant communication and just having a yearly or annual performance review that then gets postponed for a month and then another month, and maybe it becomes bi-yearly or every 5 years. You kind of want it ongoing. You want real-time feedback from your manager. But even better than that is something called working out loud. And working out loud is instead of management watching their employees work in a glass cage where they can see all the things that they're doing and control every aspect of it, instead they create observable work. The leaders themselves are transparent, and the work that they're doing can be seen and shared so others can view it, and they can contribute to it, and they can co-create with it, and they can participate with. I mean, how crazy of an idea is that? You certainly need to have trust before you can start working out loud, especially as a leader, because you don't want people to take advantage of you. You want people to respect you. But imagine how much more you would respect your boss if you have a boss, or how much more people would respect you if you are a boss, if you worked in an observable manner. And some people, especially in Silicon Valley and in some of these new startups, you're seeing more and more CEOs and leaders of companies that are narrating their work as well. So they're working out loud. They're keeping blogs. They're telling you how they feel at the end of every day and how things are going for them. Oh, it sounded kind of Valley Girl for a second. Every day. Like every day. Yeah, too much feedback. So again, here's another little chart. I don't want to go on and on and on about millennials, but right now, hiring managers believe that the most important thing is money. That's a little blue line at the top. 75% think that, why do you want to get into work? Well, it's because you want to get paid a lot of money. Well, no. I mean, yes, but not as much as you think. And you'll see there that hiring managers find that the importance of things like mentorship or working with a great team, they don't think that you care about that at all, or very, very little, because mostly what you want is money, and that's actually the opposite to true. So we've gone through having a purpose, creating a partnership, transparency and trust, and those are sort of conditions that then can start to create a new space, a new workspace, where you can be fearless. And fearlessness actually can lead to real transformation. So a lot of you have heard of mushroom managers, right? They feed you shit and keep you in the dark. And make sure that you're afraid. And that there is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They try to push you down there. They try to keep you at the bottom. They control the things that you need. They have control over the things that you need, which is when you get to eat, when you get to sleep, all those things. And you don't feel safe. And if you don't feel safe and you're afraid, then you're never going to get to the higher self-esteem where you get to self-actualize. You're never going to get to the space where you're going to be an active participant in making this company a better place, a better space. So play to your strengths, not your weaknesses. Try to find or work for a company, or even now, look at your strengths and say, first of all, what are they, and how can I use them to my absolute advantage? Because you won't have innovation in your company without people playing to their strengths. One way to do that is something called StrengthsFinder. How many of you have done StrengthsFinder or even heard of it? Do you like it? Did you like it? I heard some thumbs up. I loved it. These are my 5 top strengths. And when I saw them, I realized I was sort of doing a bit of the wrong thing. You know, strategic, ideation, sure, as a creative director, coming up with ideas. Futuristic, yes, but was I really, I was working in tech and digital, but then like intellection and activator, I'd never really thought of myself as someone that could make things happen, even though I was a director. But make things happen is something that comes from inside that allows you to be more of an entrepreneur. And in the last while since I did this test, I've been trying to practice a little bit more of my strengths, and it's definitely been to my advantage, but also made me feel better, made me happier. So StrengthsFinder, it costs $10 to do the test, which sounds like a lot maybe, but it's totally worth it. And they're not a sponsor of this. So adaptation. So instead of reaction, instead of constantly, being reactive to all the crises that are happening, better to be able to look ahead and be able to adapt, be able to change, to have transformation. And some people call that being a full stack employee. Some people call that being a polymath. But it basically means that you learn a little bit of everything. You don't have to just be a specialist, pigeonholed and put in a corner and be told what to do. You can be more fluid, like we talked about, where you get to be an active participant. Chris Messina talks about this a bit in a essay that I read. Appetite for new ideas and best practices and ways to be more productive and happy are around this idea of adaptation. Being curious about the world, what makes it work, and how do you make your mark, right? These are things that you need to think about, but you don't want to put blinders on when you get into your career or your work. There's no such thing as a career anymore, hardly. One interesting thing is that he says is that innovation is found at the boundaries between disciplines. So it's where they start to intersect. It's when you connect people that have different expertise and different ideas about different things that it starts to get interesting. So if you just hang out with people that do one thing, you're not going to learn. And you're not going to be able to adapt. You're not going to be able to change. And then your company needs to revert back to workpocalypse mode. So roles, we're almost through. So roles versus rules. Having rules means something that's imposed on you. Having a role means that you are accountable, you take action, right? You don't need to resort to gaming and politics, gaming the system in politics. So you push outward, not upward. You instead of the traditional hierarchy where it's all top-down and complicated due to politics, so-and-so sleeping with so-and-so, someone's buying weed from someone else, someone's sister is the manager's cousin's something or other, someone slept with someone, it gets crazy. And that's not going to change. But you can look at it a different way. You can look at it instead of being top-down, that it's you outward and managers outward. You can't possibly read that, I'm sure. But this is a napkin scribble that I made that I presented, actually, to senior management when I was just starting out as a creative director. And my suggestion was that, I was very naive at the time, walking in and saying, let's instead of it being top-down and authoritative, let's make this system where we have spheres of responsibility, where like I'm accountable for this and you're accountable for that, and where we overlap is where everyone will be happy. And I was laughed out of the room. But it really stuck with me that what I thought, after that I was fearful of bringing new ideas to the table anymore because I was basically made fun of. And now I realize that there are organizations that are doing this all the time. There's a whole bunch of alternatives to hierarchies One of my favorites is called holacracy, or the holocratic operation, which basically is being used by big companies like Zappos, Medium, which I'm a huge fan of, Evan Williams, the creator of Blogger and co-creator of Twitter, and now the owner of and CEO of Medium. He says, in holacracy, one of the principles is to make the implicit explicit. Tons of it is about creating clarity. Who's in charge of what, and who's taking what, and who's is taking what kind of decision. There's a system for defining that, changing it. It's very flexible. So you know your role, and then you can expand it, you can contract it, you interact with other people that also know their roles, and things happen. So the last one is greatness. You put all these things together. So instead of money or desires, greatness means the two can, everything can come together, and if everything comes together the right way, like this beautiful picture. Maybe the work apocalypse can be overcome. So you can't start at great. You can't just buy great. You have to earn it. You have to make it. Purpose really motivates an organization. Today, I read this story about JFK and how he really ignited people's imagination about getting to the moon. And this story, and I don't know if it's apocryphal or a myth, but he was at NASA, he was visiting NASA, and he asked this cleaner, this guy was sweeping the floor, and he asked him, so what's your job here? And the guy answered, sir, it's my job to help put a man on the moon. And that says a lot. I mean, it's if there's a purpose and that you buy into, that you understand, that you internally feel, it can change everything. It can make something great actually happen in your organization. And this isn't, again, just pie in the sky, airy-fairy dreamers and idealists saying this stuff. Peter Diamandis is a billionaire who co-authored first a book called Abundance, but a new book called Bold. And he says, if you want to become a billionaire, I'll tell you how to become a billionaire. He said, help 1 billion people. Figure out a way to help 1 billion people. Create a cause, a purpose. Have a purpose that matters. And, if you can help 1 billion people for $1, you're a billionaire. So we need to flip the script. Workpocalypse needs to become jobvana. We have to get away from this authoritative, fearful, top-down, controlled environment. And, I know a lot of you are saying, well, it's not ever going to change at my work, or it's not going to be that way, or I don't know how I can possibly make that happen. But it is possible. It's possible to at least attempt the change. And if you come across resistance, and you will. Richard Sheridan, who's CEO of Menlo Innovations, he has this book called Joy Inc. that I mentioned before. He says that when he talks to teams, they always say, oh, my leader would never, my manager, he would never be into this. He'd never accept this. But then when he talks to the managers and leaders, they say the same thing. They say, oh, my team would never buy into this. They'd never accept this. And his antidote to that is to just say, okay, you're probably right, but why don't we just try to run a little experiment and see what happens? So don't get cynical, everybody. Be soft. Do not let the world make you hard. Do not let pain make you hate. Do not let bitterness steal your sweetness. Take pride that even though the rest of the world may disagree, you still believe it to be a beautiful place. So don't become the working dead. Connect to people like me on LinkedIn, and we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do. Find your own massively transformative purpose. Find something that matters to you. Find your own purpose, and then sync up and link up with an organization that shares that. And if that doesn't happen, find a partner that you can work with to create that. because that's the future. So everything that I've talked about today is all on my Flipboard, all the articles, all the stuff that I've referenced. Flipboard.com/@jted is where I keep all this Workpocalypse and jobvana articles. And this entire talk is also on, I've written the whole thing as this giant, like, million-page essay that you can read on Medium. So I should have told you that before, but taking notes is good. So at medium.com/jted. And yeah, please, please, please don't get bit. Thank you very much.